Okay, welcome back to Alma 48 Project. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of going through and explaining what the more basic principles are, and then throughout all of these podcasts or these videos, I'm going to be expanding on each of these different elements more deeply so that I can kind of explain what they're talking about. So right here is what I have developed as my standard of what I'm looking for. This is the way that I would like my life to be. So here at the bottom, I have truth. Next, I have integrity. Next, all of these pillars are principles. Up here, I have character. Here, I have joy. And here, I have myself. Now, each of these has an important aspect to it. Truth is something that I really have thought a lot about and continue to think about and feel like it's probably the basis to all things. Truth is things as they really are. It's not my interpretation of it. It's not an opinion about it. And it's an interesting thing that truth, so there are people who will say, well, it's my opinion and that's my truth. And you can do that if it's something that's just about, so for example, the color yellow. If I say that the color yellow is my favorite color, that really it can be my favorite color, but that doesn't mean that it's the best color out there. So you can have an opinion about truth and be wrong. For example, 2 plus 2 is 4. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, 2 plus 2 is 4. I can say, well, 2 plus 2 to me equals 5. That's my truth. So that's not truth. That's an opinion about truth. And so that's one of those things that as time goes on, I can go a little bit deeper into it, but I think that's one of the faults or one of the things that we can get caught up in easily. Integrity, I really like a definition. So I had a friend that was a engineer, and I took part of what he told me was the definition in engineering and combined it with some other things of my own. But basically what I've come up with as a definition of integrity is the ability to withstand any external force and maintain its true form and perform its intended function. Now the reason why that's quite a big mouthful, but the reason why that's so important is because in integrity there is room for movement. There is room for not rigidity. So for example, when they build a skyscraper is intended to have movement, but it's controlled movement. If it was just rigid and stiff and there was no movement, then it would actually snap off or break or just the whole thing would tip over. It has to have that ability to move. A willow tree is another good example of that. If the willow tree didn't have the ability to move with the wind or other things, and it was just completely rigid, then it would blow over or break. And so integrity is the ability to go with that, but come back to its natural state, or come back to the intended or the beginning of where it was. And one of the things, so for example, in building, when they say something has structural integrity, they're saying, okay, all the things that we've decided based on an engineer, all these things are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the way they're supposed to be doing them, they're going to hold the weight they're supposed to be holding, all those things. So as silly as it seems, if you take a 2x6 and you even just put a little notch in the bottom of that 2x6, that compromises the integrity of that board. And what it does is it doesn't mean that it's not still a 2x6, it's still a 2x6, but its ability to withstand, or the ability to carry a certain amount of weight, is reduced because of that notch in it. And so even though it's still a 2x6, it no longer has the integrity of a 2x6. And so that's, again, this is one that I'll go into a lot more deeply in regards to how that applies to us as individuals. But integrity is really hard to understand sometimes because there is variability. There is stuff that can happen. There are elements of this that make it so it's not so rigid that you can't move, but it also makes it so that you don't move off of that original point. So these are principles, and the reason why I put these as the pillars is because you can have as many principles as you want. You can have hundreds or thousands of principles that are beliefs and your ability or your desire to act a certain way. And so those principles are what you base your life on. Now, the more of these principles that you have, the more you're able to withstand one of these being compromised. So for example, I have a principle, let's say I have a principle of honesty. And so this is my principle of honesty. And I want to be honest in all things. But somehow, some way, something happens, and I make a decision, and the decision I make is to compromise this, to not be honest. So I've damaged or compromised this principle. If I've got a lot of other principles that are helping sustain me and hold me up and take care of me, then I have the ability to then take this principle and repair it and restore it, and I can put it back the way it needs to be, and it can once again hold up the way, do the things it's intended to do. But if I only have, let's say I only have two principles, and one of those is compromised, this is not going to stand, everything's going to fall. And so there is no right or wrong on those, that's up to you to decide. And there are certain principles that people adhere to more strictly than others, and there's certain principles that they've refined more. And all of those are up to you. Those are your, what do I want to live my life by? How do I want to be as a person? And that is what character is based upon. How much truth, or how much truth do you follow? How much integrity do you have in this truth? And then what are your principles? And that kind of identifies or defines what your character is. One of the things that when I initially started doing this, I actually thought about calling this character discovery. And the reason I actually initially started with character development, but then as I thought more about it, I kind of have the belief that our character is in us. We already have those abilities, those principles, those ideals. We just have to uncover those and remember what they are. I believe very strongly that we have principles. We have something inside of us that tells us what's right, what's wrong. And it's different for everybody. Everybody has a different set of those. And there's elements of this as well that aren't even necessarily based on that. Part of your character could be that you love art. And that has no right or wrong to it. It has no relevance. Somebody else can love sports. So all of this is all part of who you are. This is what you've developed into, or what things that you really enjoy doing. So character has a lot of importance. And I believe that this is the outcome of how well or how closely we follow these three elements to basis. Above character is joy. So I thought a lot about this one, and this one, there's a lot of ways you can describe it. You can say happiness, and you can say those other things. And I get that, and I think that those things have place, but I think joy is a feeling that's apart from others. And it's not, like you might even be able to put happiness up here as well, or contentment, or other things like that. Like there's a lot of different ways you can describe this, but I chose joy. And then up here is you, and that's who you are. That's the person that you've become, or even the person that you're becoming. So you may not be here yet. All of these things below are strengthening and solidifying and expanding who you are. And the reason why I did this is because there's also, in my belief, there's a counterfeit to all of this. So I believe with everything I am that there is a God, and that He is our Heavenly Father, and that He is true and honest and patient and loving, and every good character trait that we believe, He has that perfectly. In fact, in the King James Bible Dictionary, one of the things that it says about a prophet is that he is supposed to help us understand the character of God. And I think that the reason why that's so imperative is because I think it's easy to attribute characteristics of us to Him. So if I'm impatient, or I can be impatient, I'm more likely to assign a little bit more impatience to Him, or believe that He's less patient than He actually is. So I think that we apply those character traits, and some people read the Bible in the Old Testament and they say He was an angry and a vengeful God. And that's how they perceive Him. But that is not His character. That might be the perception of what they thought He was, but that's not His character. So as we go through this, I believe that's kind of our goal, is to figure out who we were and be that person here. And the way we become that person here is by overcoming the weaknesses and the faults and the flaws and all the things that act against all of this. And so this is my Satan's version of this. This to me is kind of like what God is hoping for us to accomplish. This over here is Satan's version. So down here at the bottom is counterfeit. So a counterfeit, Satan's greatest desire is to get this as close as he can to the truth. He wants this to be so close that it's hard to tell the difference. And I think, as you look at it, I think I use the example, if somebody hands you a $20 bill from Monopoly, nobody's going to use that. Nobody's going to think that that's worth money. But if you do a really good counterfeit, there's going to be more people that will accept that and believe that that's true, believe that that's accurate. And the more it looks like a true $20 bill, the more that they apply value to it, the more they will look at it and they'll go and spend it as $20. And then when somebody accepts that, then it basically perpetuates that belief that it has that value. And so what I believe happens is we present, or Satan presents things in such a way that there's an element of truth to that. And that element of truth then kind of pulls us in, and then we base everything off of the whole thing. And it's just, it's not accurate. It isn't the truth. And I told you before, and I think I quoted the wrong author, but what he said in his book was that statement of one be the truth and one be a lie. Can there be any greater difference? And so what ends up happening is because we have an idea that we're trying to create value or assign value to, we'll use that counterfeit, which is the truth of it, and then we'll add our own little spin or society spin or whatever we need to do to try to somehow create the value in this. The next one is persistence. Now, the reason why persistence is the counterfeit of integrity is because if I do something over and over and over and over again, it may seem like I'm having integrity. It may seem like, oh, I'm just staying with that. But I can persistently do something wrong. I can be persistent in being mean. I can be persistently mean. And that isn't an admirable or a desirable trait or quality. So persistence in something doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing. I know people that have made the same mistakes for years. And that doesn't mean that we had an individual that came and told me that he knew how to do concrete. So I said, okay, well, let me see what you got. So he got down and started doing stuff, and he did a couple of things that were the wrong steps. And I just said, well, that's not right. And he's like, well, that's how I learned it. And I've done it this way for 30 years. And all I could say was, okay, that's great. You've been doing it wrong for 30 years. And so persistence does not mean that it's right or correct. So this is the other one, purpose. These are the pillars of purpose. So the reason principles and purpose are different, and the way that they're different, is that principles are values, and they're based in saying this is what is right, and this is what is wrong. And so that's what matters. Purpose, on the other hand, is I want an outcome. And the best way to describe purpose is the ends justify the means. So whatever I need to do to accomplish what I want to do here, it's okay because the outcome is what I want it to be. And again, that's where, that's a really common statement. Most people have heard that the ends justify the means, and that's not accurate. Those are little things that we've decided in society that we accept, and it's okay that we say those. So up here is the one that I really believe is probably the focus of what I've done in regards to these, and that is caricature. So in a caricature, what you'll do is you'll take particular principles, or you'll take particular strengths or abilities or things like that, and you'll highlight those and you'll focus on them. So when you go get a caricature done of you, they'll typically pick something that is obvious, something that's right out there in front. So like, for example, if I wear glasses, maybe they're going to draw big, huge glasses over the top. Or I'm going bald, so he'll draw a big, huge bald head. But the point of caricature is to draw attention to those particular traits, and in doing that, we kind of ignore or pay less attention to the other traits. This puts stuff so far in front of us, and part of the problem with caricature is I can be a really good guy. I can go out and serve people, and I can be the first guy, running to help my neighbor, do all these other things, but I may be cheating and stealing and lying in my business. And so the caricature is there's going to be things that we see out front. There's going to be things that we see, and most people want other people to see them in their best. So like when you're dating, you're kind of showing your date the caricature. You're not showing them your character per se, and I'm not saying nobody does, but I'm saying most often we put on we're always dressing nice, we're always putting that cologne on, taking a shower, doing all those things. And we're doing that to present ourselves in a particular way. And the problem with that is there comes a point in time where this no longer, the other things become evident. The other things, we see those and we're like, wait a minute, what about this? And we don't want them to look at it. No, look at this. This is great. Look at how amazing I am in this way. And the thing that I personally believe is that most people can deal with faults and flaws and weaknesses and things like that if we're up front about it, if we tell them what those are. It's when we hide them. It's when we pretend like they're not there, and worst of all, deny them and act like we don't have them at all. That's when it really gets to be a problem. So above that, I have pleasure. Joy is very different than pleasure. Pleasure needs to be continuously redone. It needs to be, it goes for a point and then it goes away. And then you've got to go back and do something again. And again, it's not in a criticism of anybody, but drugs are a very obvious thing like this. People can do alcohol or drugs too because they're really struggling. They're having a moment of frustration or crisis or whatever. And so they'll turn to that, and it gives them that moment of pleasure. It gives them that moment of escape from what's going on. But eventually it comes back. Eventually they come back to having to deal with what's going on, and they are not happy or they're not experiencing joy. It's a false way of doing this, and this becomes a tool to kind of lure people in and say, hey, this will make you feel better. And it does for a while, but it isn't a permanent solution. And then up here is the you. And it's based upon these things. And so when we follow this pathway, the you up here is unhappy, the you up here is, we know when we're messing up. We know when we've got things that we're hiding. We know when there's things that we're not being open and honest about. And those things eat at us. Those things are there. No matter how much we don't talk about them or don't put them out in the forefront, they're still there. And so they affect the outcome. They affect where we're at. So in all of this, this is kind of the basis that I'm going to found all of this stuff on. And so each element, each thing that I look at, each thing that I evaluate, each way that I look at myself, and as I try to make myself a better person, I have to identify, is this a principle or is it a purpose? Because you can interchange these. So I can have a bunch of principles here, but then I can have some purposes in there as well. And that's what I have to find out. Is there something that as far as integrity, that I am having integrity in doing it, or am I just being persistent? And these are the questions. So this is the hardest part, because down at the bottom of all of it, we have to be honest with ourselves. So one of the things that I thought a lot about is my goal is not to dictate to anybody what should be in any of these areas. I don't want to, that's not my goal. My goal is not to say, oh, well, you should have this and you should have that. I have my own things that I want, but what I want to do is help individuals look at themselves and figure out which of the, where am I at? Because again, you can come up to here and instead of joy, you can have pleasure. So that's the hard part, is figuring out, is this a correct, or is this how I really want this to be when it comes to a particular trait or behavior? Is it following this, or does it have some of this in there? And if it has some of this in here, then I need to work on identifying what's making it caricature as opposed to my character. How do I need to fix that? What things can I do to make myself better? So the two things that I would suggest is that have yourself accountable to somebody. And by that somebody, that can, if you read in scriptures, typically what they do is they come to themselves. So like the prodigal son, he ended up coming to himself. And as he came to himself, he realized, oh my goodness, this is just horrible. I'm not okay with where I'm at. I need to fix this. And so that's the first thing we have to do. Come to ourselves. Recognize. Not have somebody else tell us that, but we have to own what of our behaviors are not the way we want them to be. And in owning that, we're coming to ourselves. And then after that, so like if you read about Enos, who is also a Book of Mormon character. So Enos talks about how he went and he started pleading to the Lord. He remembered things that his father taught him, and then he started pleading to the Lord for his own sake. But once he realized where he was at, once he realized that he'd received an atonement for his sins, he then started praying for other people. So my belief is we have to make ourselves right. So before I can go to my wife and have she and I have a conversation, I've got to get myself right. Now, one of the most amazing benefits and blessings of having that partner as a spouse is that you can go to them. Now, hopefully, your relationship is such that you trust them. You trust them enough to be honest enough with you to tell you if something's off. Do they love you enough to say, no, you're kind of bad on this? Or are we defensive? Do we push back against that? And that's for everybody to have their own, determination of what's right, what's wrong, how they want that relationship to go. But I will say that my wife is absolutely and without question my first sounding board. I'll take that back. The Savior is the first sounding board. I go to my Heavenly Father, I tell him how I feel, I tell him what I think, I go to him first. And as I feel good about those things, or if I feel like I've received the confirmation about a perspective of something, then I go to my wife and I say, hey, I was praying about this, this is kind of how I feel, what do you think? That's an amazing blessing to have. So if you don't have a spouse or a partner, you can have a mother or a father, or you can have a bishop, you can have a spiritual leader. There's always something there. There's always somebody there. My ultimate hope and goal would be that if over time, I develop or I express these things and these things make sense to you and you feel like it's an uplifting thing, if it gets you to feel the Spirit, then maybe at some point you may feel comfortable giving me feedback or telling me something. I absolutely don't want that to be in place of a spouse or a partner or somebody else. I think that's, if your relationship that way, if you're in a relationship and it isn't that way, then that's maybe the first place you start, is evaluating yourself and how are you not contributing to that relationship. What are you doing that's making that relationship not be what you want it to be? So over time, I'm going to go through these things. I've identified a whole bunch of counterfeits, things that I feel like whether it's society in general, maybe it's just myself, but there's a lot of areas where I see myself not being who I want to be, or I see society putting things out there that they want us to believe or accept or say, okay, that's how I feel, that's what I think, and I just don't think that's the case. I think there's so many things that we need to do better, and I don't want society to be what dictates or determines my value system. I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought about the Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't know when the last time was that you heard the Pledge of Allegiance in public, but I was thinking about it, and I thought, if you listen to the words of that, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Now, there's people that look at that and they think that that's idolatry or other things like that. I get that, and that's their opinion. But I think that when it comes down to that, we're pledging our allegiance to the United States of America. All the flag is a symbol or a representation of the United States of America. And so, as we do that, we pledge our allegiance to that United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. So what we're doing is we're pledging to be a contributing factor in the democratic republic that we have. We're pledging to be a part of that. We're pledging to say, I will accept or put myself in a position to be governed by this government, the way it's set up. And so that's to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. To me, that is the most forgotten, most omitted element in our society today. We were a nation under God. Everything they did, they started with prayers. They said prayers constantly. You read prayers in the beginning of the time, and we've become so anti-prayer that now it's like, heaven forbid you say a prayer. Heaven forbid you mention God or do any of those things. And I'm not foolish enough to believe that the United States of America became the United States of America because the people were better than all the other people in all the other societies and all the other, times of history. It's just not the case. And I don't believe for one second that we as a society would be where we were at or are at right now had it not been for our belief and our foundation upon God. And I believe that this is our country. This is the land that we've been given by Heavenly Father. We didn't get this. Like, if you look at all the different things that it's taken for us to, first of all, get here, but then second of all, maintain this and maintain our independence and maintain our circumstances to be able to thrive and become the country we've become, that's a lot. There's too much stuff going on there to somehow say that that's just, we were just that good. And there are flaws. There's lots of flaws. There's lots of mistakes we made as a country. But as we've overcome those, the question is, are we overcoming them, or are we dragging ourselves back into those issues again? Because when it comes to the way we act, when it comes to the way we believe, when it comes to the things that we feel, we've got to be able to allow ourselves the tolerance to have the faults and the flaws. So the reason why character and caricature makes such a big deal to me is because character is everything that is you. Character is your weaknesses, your shortcomings. It's all of it. It's the good, it's the bad, it's everything. It's the tendencies, it's the weaknesses, it's all of it. That's your character. When we look at a cabinet and we look at it and we're like, oh, that has character. Why does that matter? Why does it have value? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why does something that we say has character, why is it so valuable? And I've thought a lot about that. And what I would say to you is this. So let's take furniture, for example. I look at a piece of furniture and it's got dings and bangs and things all over it. But what strikes me is that through all of that, through whatever created all those dings and those nicks and those chunks taken out of it, it still performs its intended purpose. It's still a cabinet that I can put things in. It's still an armoire. In fact, it's something that we look at and we just think, man, that's amazing. That thing's 300 years old. Look at what it's been through. And you see marks on there that say, this is what it's been through. And it's still standing. It's still here. So I would suggest to you that your character is something where some of those faults and those flaws and those weaknesses and those shortcomings, when they see that you've come through that, and you're a good guy, you're a nice person, you're kind, you're generous, you're obedient, you're faithful, all those qualities, even though you've got all these faults and all these flaws and all these things that you did wrong, that is character. And I have a saying when it comes to character. If we don't think it's broken, we're not going to fix it. So when I deny my weaknesses or my faults or my shortcomings, and I pretend like they're not there, I just deny them. I'm like, no, I don't have any problem with that. When I deny that, I'm not going to fix it because I pretend like it's not broken. I act like it's not a problem. And that is the most dangerous part of all of this, of having a caricature. Because I'm going to look at only my good things. I'm going to look at all the things that say what a good person I am and how valuable I am and what a great guy I am. I'll look at all that, but I will forget or omit or minimize or disregard the things that are faults and flaws. So one of the things that I think a lot about is there's a saying that in scriptures that say, "Come to me and I will show you your weaknesses, that they may become strengths." So the way that happens, it doesn't mean necessarily that it becomes a strength in the sense that you've overcome it. So an example of that. So if I know I'm a horrible artist, I know I can't draw worth beans. My stick figures look like circle figures. I can't draw straight lines. I'm just terrible at that. So awareness of that is one thing. Awareness and ownership of that is another. And because of those things, my strength isn't that I overcome it and I become a great artist, necessarily. Now, there are some people that do that. But my strength can absolutely be, you know what, I am horrible at this. I'm going to go find somebody that is good at this. And I'm going to say to them, you know what, I need to draw these pictures. I can't do it. Could you please do this for me? In fact, my wife, so I had my wife come and draw these for me. And even though they're kind of a little bit wonky, not nearly as bad as they would be if I did it myself. So thank you, honey, for doing these for me. But that's exactly why I did this. Because I know I can sort of get the general idea out there, but not nearly, I feel like this is much better. And so I'm not a better artist because I acknowledge that. It just means I'm going to go find somebody who can take my place or figure this out for me. So for example, somebody who has a weakness in a particular area, let's say I'm not organized. They'll go hire somebody to organize themselves for them. So there's a lot of people that did the Covey Franklin Planner because they felt like he was really good at organizing. And so they really appreciated him helping them do that. So I'm hoping that as I'm talking about these things, that it's recognized that I'm not saying that I'm good at this, that I'm not saying that I can do this better than somebody else. I hope that what's being seen is that you'll find somebody to help you overcome or address that weakness. So again, as I said, we'll go through all of this. We'll get these things. We'll kind of go through the definitions of all of these, and then we'll give examples of these things. But I just feel like it's so imperative that we recognize when we struggle, that we admit it, that we own it, we acknowledge it. And as we do that, this character is what will take place. I'm big into sports, love sports. And one of the things that I just cannot stand Tom Brady. Not as a person, not as anything, I just hated him as a football player. Because I don't like guys that win all the time necessarily. I like the underdogs. I like seeing an underdog, winning once in a while. So, but I will tell you right now, one of the most amazing games I've ever seen is the game with the Falcons. Like, I've watched the replays of that, and it just astonishes me. The things that happen, the ways they happen, it's one of the most amazing, probably one of the most amazing football games I've seen. And it's because they came from so far back and conquered. One of the things that I'm looking at is I just want to be able to help somebody else recognize those things. And if at some point I earn your confidence and I can walk through some of these things with you, or I can help identify some of the things that you recognize in yourself, if you feel that kind of confidence, I would hope that I would be able to help you figure out maybe ways to identify these things. And then as far as what you need to do to fix them or overcome them, that's something that you can use a professional to do. You can do it with yourself, you can do it with your spouse. But I really believe the greatest source of all of that is our Father in heaven. And that if we go to Him with our weaknesses and we admit those and acknowledge those and lay them down before Him and say to Him, this is my weakness, this is my fault, I don't know what to do about this, He will inspire or guide you. And maybe that is that you make some kind of a rule with your wife or bishop or somebody. Like, I don't know how any of that looks. That's all an individual plan. The other thing that I feel really strongly about pointing out is that I was talking about the game that Tom Brady won. Not very many people look at a game where somebody was down by 1 point and they kick a field goal because they're at the 15-yard line. I'm sorry for those of you that aren't sports enthusiasts. What astonishes us, what inspires us, what really motivates us or moves us is that when we hear about somebody that was really down, when we hear about somebody that was really behind, like I can't remember the movie, like 121 Hours or whatever it is, guy is climbing in Zion, gets his arm stuck and ends up cutting his own arm off. That's an amazing story. That's an inspiring story. The guy's lost his arm, but it inspires us because it tells us, oh my goodness, this is possible. And as we believe that's possible, then it becomes more possible in our own minds that, well, I've heard somebody did that, maybe that can be done. 4-minute mile was a huge thing for forever. Everybody said it can't be done. Physiologically, humans are not built to do it, it just can't be done. And now everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of the top tier people, they do 4-minute miles all the time. And it's that sense of breaking the barrier and doing something that makes it possible. Another one that really comes to mind is Mike Tyson. Nobody could beat that guy. Man, half those guys walked into that thing just scared to death, like, all right, let him hit me once, I'll get my paycheck. Because he would just wreck them. And they would see that, and on top of just knowing how imposing he was, there was a lot of psychological stuff going on as well. And so part of it was the physical, part of it was the ability, but there was also that added element of, oh my goodness, this can't be done. So what I'm hoping is that we realize that a lot of the things that we think can't be done, we only see them that way because we either haven't seen them done or we personally haven't experienced it. And so that makes it harder for us to believe that it can be done. And so it can get in our way. Like there's a lot of elements to all of this, and as we go through some of these other YouTube videos, hopefully I can address some of those things. And especially as people start interacting and they start giving me feedback, I would really appreciate that. If there's a particular subject, if there's a particular item that you want to talk about, I'd love to be able to do that. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged, I had an amazing dad. He was just phenomenal. And he was a financial planner, but he was also a stimulational speaker. So my dad told me one time, because I remember we used to go see, he would talk about J.J. Armas, and so like the older people, Stephen R. Covey, guys that were older, that, now there's a new set of guys that are the motivators and stuff. But I remember he told me one time, he says there's 3 ways that people make changes. They're either motivated, they're inspired, or they're stimulated. And so the motivation was something that happens within yourself. He said there's no such thing as a motivational speaker unless it's the voice in your head. Because only you can make you do something. And that's what motivation is that we make ourselves do something. Inspirational speakers are somebody that's going to stand up there, they're going to deliver a speech, and you're going to feel like you can just conquer the world. They may not even talked about what your issue was, but somehow you've gained strength, you've regained purpose, you've regained focus, and now you feel like you can do that thing. So you were inspired by what was set up there. And like I said, it doesn't even mean that they have to say the exact thing that you were thinking about. It just, they said something that inspired you. And there's different ways to do that. Intellectually, you can be inspired. Spiritually, you can be inspired. There's socially, you can be inspired. There's all kinds of ways to do that. So inspiration is great. Stimulation is acting upon something. So for example, I can say, my motorcycle isn't starting. I don't know how to get it to start. And somebody will think, well, just jump on it, push in the clutch and then just push that thing. And as you push it for a certain point, and then you pop the clutch and it kicks on. So that was stimulational. You did something to move that bike first, and then once you got it going, then the bike kicked in and took over, and then did something. So stimulational is, the example I think about all the time is when you're laying in bed at night, you're laying in bed asleep, and somebody comes in to wake you up. They're shaking you and saying, hey, it's time to get up, you gotta go to school. They're stimulating you to get up, become aware, become awake, and do stuff. So that's a stimulational thing. There's actual contact. There's something being done to you, acted upon you, that makes you go do that. Motivational is always from within yourself. So I can be inspired by a religious leader, but that does nothing unless I go and take that inspiration and I go do something with that. So a lot of times there's a combination of those two things working together. You're going to get stimulation or inspiration, and then you become motivated and you do it yourself. So I'm jumping around and touching on a bunch of little subjects and things like that, and like I said, these are my first couple of postings, and so if, as you go through and see this, a couple of things that I would ask for, if you do feel like there's something good here, please bear with me for a little bit, see if there's something more, and if there is, great. Hopefully you'll like and subscribe, and then maybe pass that on to other people, and it can become something more. If not, that's fine. Appreciate your time, whatever time you have spent. And if there's nobody that ever watches it, that's fine too, because these are things that I will rewatch and things that I will, not because of myself, but to any degree, but because I want to do better and become better. I'm trying really hard not to edit these a lot, because I want to see the mistakes and the faults and the flaws, and hopefully I can do better and be better as I recognize those things, and as I see them happening, then I can hopefully, make changes. I notice I keep pointing to this side of it, and I'm trying to remember to do these things. So it's definitely my novice attempt. So like I said, if you could do me a favor and bear with me, if you're of a mind to, please subscribe and like, and then share. And then as time goes on, I really hope that I can get more feedback, and as I do that, I can interact a little bit more directly with you. But I will leave you with one of the stories of my dad. So when I was about 8 years old, my dad used to tell us all the time, we can do anything we put our minds to. And as a kid, I grew up with that mentality. I grew up being told that all the time. That was always put in my head. And there was a point where he was trying to stimulate his guys or inspire his guys. And so he asked me to come and do some push-ups. And I loved doing push-ups or sit-ups or little exercises and things like that as a kid. So when I was about 8 years old, my dad had me come and do push-ups for his guys. And so my dad asked me, I loved soda pop. Red cream soda was like a magic elixir. And so he would say to me, he's like, all right, son, I'm going to have you come and do 50 push-ups. You do 50 push-ups, I'll give you a red cream soda. And I'm like, cool, I can do that. So I get up on this table in front of all these guys. There's probably 30, 40 guys. And one of the guys stands behind and puts, holds my feet in place, and so I start doing push-ups. And I get to about 40, 45, somewhere in that neighborhood, and my dad says to me, he says, Chris, do 75. You do 75, and I'll give you two red cream sodas. And I'm thinking, okay, I can do that. So I started going again, and I got close to that number again. And then my dad said to me again, he's like, son, if you'll do 100, I will give you 4 red cream sodas. Now, the mentality that my dad had in that, it's really interesting that the way he did that. He didn't go to the 3. He incrementally or exponentially increased my reward. So instead of just going up by the 1, because he knew that I was going up a lot more, he said, okay, I'll give you 4. So that increased my motivation, made me feel like I was getting way more out of it than I was before. So I decided, okay, I can do that. So I started getting close to 100. And back then they had 6-packs. And my dad said to me, he's like, son, if you do 110, I'll give you a 6-pack. And it was only, again, he used that mentality of, I'm going to give you 2 more for only doing 10 push-ups more. And as I got further and further, part of the reason he did that is because he knew, now I'm burnt out. Now I'm getting sore. My arms are shaking. It's a lot more work. But he eventually ended up doing that to the point where I was going to get 2 packs of red cream sodas if I did 140 push-ups. And I remember the feeling of about 130, a bunch of his guys started saying, I don't think you can do it. A bunch of his guys started saying, yeah, I don't think so. And they kind of were doing little side bets with each other. And they're like, yeah, I'll give you $10 if he makes it today. So I heard them doing this. And it's one of those things where I think these are the subtle things that my dad did and had in him as a personality that I just really appreciated. My dad heard that, and then he looked at my face. And I personally believe he could see the doubt. Because one of the guys made the comment, he's like, look at his arms, look at how bad they're shaking. And as soon as he said that, I immediately looked at my arms, and they were wobbling. And probably one of the greatest things my dad did, and it's one of those things that I reflect on all the time, is my dad went around to the front of the table. He was standing kind of behind the table. He went around to the front of the table, and he went just like this, and he's like, son, look at me, just look at me. Ignore them, they don't matter. You look at me. He's like, you can do this. And I remember the final push-ups, I did not take my eyes off of him. I didn't look to one side or the other. I ignored everything they were saying. I did not look at anything or anyone else. And I did the 140, and everybody started cheering, and everybody started yelling. And I remember I did 1 more. And when we were all done, and we were driving home, and I had my 2 big old 6-packs of soda. I was feeling like the king of the world. My dad asked me, he said, son, why did you do 1 more? And I remember the feeling, and I said to him, because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. And the thought was, everything up to that point had been motivated by the soda pop he was going to give me. Everything had been motivated by him being proud of me, or guys being astonished, or all these other things. All these other things were external satisfaction, external pieces that would make me feel better about myself. But I wanted something for me. I wanted something internal. And so doing that one last one was for me. That wasn't for anybody else. It wasn't for soda pop. It wasn't for my dad. That was for me. And at the time, I didn't understand the principle, didn't understand the concept, didn't know how much that meant. But that's just what felt right. And I want to tell you, I have had so many experiences like that in my life. None of it is because I'm so smart or so aware or so anything, any of that stuff. If anything, I have become more aware than ever of my own nothingness. I have become aware that every strength, every gift, every talent, anything that I think or that I like about myself is something that Heavenly Father has blessed me with and has shown me to me. And that, for me, is what brings the ultimate joy. It's not about external validation. It's not about somebody telling me I'm good or somebody thinking I'm good. I could get 1 million views on this, and that's not going to validate or invalidate what I think. I could get 0 views. I could get 50,000 hate mails. It doesn't change what this is for me or what this means to me. And that is where I believe I want to do better, be better, become better in that inner peace, that sense of I'm doing my best. And I'll tell you, I've got so many faults and flaws and mistakes and weaknesses. I mean, they're just out there. And so in no way do I want to hold myself up, because I don't think, I'll use another example. I remember I went golfing with a guy, and when we were golfing, I had buried my bum in a bunker, and the bunker's probably 8 feet tall. And I'm looking at that, and I'm just like, how in the heck am I going to get this ball up onto that green? And at the time, Phil Mickelson was one of the guys that was just known for his ability to shoot a flop drop, or a flop shot. And so I'm looking at this, and I've got a really steep degree wedge, and I'm thinking to myself, okay. So I asked the guy that I was there with golf, and I says, hey, what do you think Phil Mickelson would do in this case? And he looked at me for a minute, and he's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, what do you think I should do? And he kind of looked at me again, he's like, I don't know. Now, it didn't help that we were seeing whoever had the low score was going to buy lunch for the other guy, so none of that helped. I'm sure that was something in the back of his mind. But I just decided, okay, I'm going to get out there and just hit the best shot I can. So I hit a shot, and it was probably the best version of a flop shot that I could have ever shot in my life. I mean, that ball just went almost straight up in the air and hit almost like somebody just stood up there and just dropped it. And it dropped and it rolled to within probably 5 inches of the cup. And it was kind of on the back of a green, and the hole was down here, so there was like a lot of slope going away from it. So if it didn't catch and sit, it was going to go a long ways. So I ended up hitting this shot, and he turned around. He had a wedge that he had in his hand. He turned around and just chucked his wedge over to his bags. And he's like, that's ridiculous. So anyway, we ended up finishing, and as we were sitting down and eating at the end, I happened to win. But at the end, he asked me, he's like, why'd you even ask me what I thought? I was like, well, I just wanted to see what you thought. And he's like, why does it even matter? He's like, one, I'm not Phil Mickelson. You're not Phil Mickelson. So what does it matter what shot he would shoot? Whatever shot he's going to shoot is his best shot. Not your shot, not my shot. That's his shot. And that really struck me. And then the second thing he said is, he's like, why are you asking anybody else? You're the one that's got to hit that shot. You're the guy that's got to figure out, how am I going to do this? What's the best way to do that? And I told him, I says, well, I was just trying to get your input. And he's like, I've been golfing maybe a couple times with you. How am I supposed to know what your talent is, what your ability is, what you're good at, what you're not good at? He's like, I don't know. And it really struck me that sometimes we do that. We're not asking somebody their opinion of what should I do here or why should I do this. We're not even looking for that. We just want to feel better, like we're not just all out there by ourselves. This isn't all on us. Somebody's going to help me. Somebody's going to say, oh, I think this is the best shot or the best idea. And because now we think that there's a couple of us that think that same way, it makes it easier or a little more comfortable because I'm not by myself. And there's times where that matters. There's times where that helps, but there's times where it doesn't. There's times where it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Doesn't matter what they say. Doesn't matter what they would do. You're the person making that choice. You're the person whose life that's going to affect. You're the person who is going to have to carry out whatever decision you make. So there's a lot that goes into that, but it's about you. And if you believe in religion or in a God, then hopefully you feel like you have that comfort of somebody or something there to assist you and aid you. And that is comforting. That is really comforting to feel like I'm not on my own. I'm not doing this by myself. I don't have to figure this out on my own. There's something or somebody that knows way better than I do. And I can go to that source, and that source knows me so perfectly that they can tell me exactly what I should do or exactly what things I need to look at, because the choice is still ultimately mine. I still end up making that decision. It's never made for me. And so when it comes to all of this stuff, people watching stimulational or inspirational videos on YouTube or TikTok or whatever you look at them on, all of those people are looking for help and advice, and that's good. And it is good to look for that and seek that. But somewhere, somehow, some way, you've got to get it in your mind and in your heart that you're going to do what you're going to do. And you got to be okay with that. Whether that's right or wrong or good or bad, you got to figure it out. And then you make those choices, and then you decide, if I don't like that outcome, how can I change that? What can I do in the future? I can't go back and undo that. There's no rewind button in life. The only thing we can hope to do is prepare ourselves if that opportunity or if that situation ever presents itself again, or to do the best that we can to repair the damage that may have been caused by that bad choice. That's something else I really want to talk a lot about. And I hope this really, again, I'm doing a lot of different things, but I hope some of these things give you an idea of the way I think and where I want to go with all this. There's a huge difference, and I think this is one of the counterfeits. There's a difference between a mistake and a bad decision. A mistake is, oops, I misspelled your name. A mistake is, I was carrying my drink to the car and I tripped and I dropped my drink. Those are mistakes. Those are accidents, things that weren't intended, they just didn't happen right. Those are all mistakes. Bad decisions are not mistakes. Bad decisions are bad decisions. And when you make a bad decision, that is a completely different thing than making a mistake. Making a mistake, that's usually a little more fixable. Making a bad decision has much deeper and further reaching consequences. Therefore, it is more imperative that we recognize when we've made a bad decision or a bad choice and not call it a mistake. Because it wasn't a mistake. It was a bad choice or a bad decision. And so that's just one simple example of what I look at and say, there's a counterfeit and there's a truth. If I look at it and I say it was just a mistake, then it's a counterfeit. And I'm going to eventually go up here and I'm going to apply a caricature to that. Oh, that isn't who I am. That isn't what I did. Silly me. Or I'm honest with myself. I tell myself the truth. I look at that circumstance and I say, that was a terrible choice. Look at all the bad that came out of that. I don't want that to happen again. How do I fix that? Truth will drive you to change your behavior. Truth will drive you, and truth is hard. Truth is not always pleasant. But we're only going to be motivated when we acknowledge truth as truth. Counterfeit will always excuse my behavior. I can work and manipulate and deny this and turn this into something that's just a mistake. I didn't see this, I didn't see that, I didn't think about this, I didn't think about that. It's just a mistake. When we do that, we will not change the behavior. We will deny what the actual truth of those circumstances are. And that's not good. We need to be willing to make that decision. We need to be willing to make that change. And so, I will say this is something that, again, in no way am I trying to hold myself up as the exemplar. I'm not trying to put myself in a position to say, hey, look at me, do what I do, I figured this out. None of that. All I know is I know that there's a pattern that I've started following, and I've started applying anything and everything that I do or say or think to these things, and I try to ask myself, where do they fall? And as I've done that, it's been hard. I've caught myself at times trying to tell myself this is the truth, and then over time I'm kind of like, you know what, maybe it's not. Maybe that's just a counterfeit. Maybe that's some of the things that I've told myself. And it is hard. It is a lot harder to undo this than it is to do this. And, in scriptures they talk about speak smooth things to us. Well, part of the reason they want to speak smooth things to us is because they want it to be easier. My daughter in a mission farewell made a great saying or great statement. She said, missions are simple, but they're not easy. And that is a principle, that is a concept that has stuck with me ever since. Just because something's easier doesn't make it better. I can go to the gym and I can put 2 5-pound weights on the end of the gym and pump that 20 times and tell people I work out every day. I work out for an hour and a half every day. But I'm just not getting as big as I want to get. Well, part of that's because I'm doing it easy. It's way easier to just put those little light weights on there and go in and do your exercises. But if you want to grow, you want to become stronger, you truly want to get that progress that you want to see, you need to be willing to do the hard work. You need to be willing to put in the time. You need to be willing to, sweat and really struggle through those things. That's when you'll see the progress. And one of the other principles that I really believe with all my heart, our Father in heaven has given us the opportunity to come to this earth to be tried and tested. It's not much of a test if somebody gives us all the answers. It's not very hard if somebody's I'm just turning and saying, hey, what is the answer to this? And they tell me. That doesn't test me at all. So we have to go through times of not understanding. We have to be willing to go through times of kind of punting and guessing. We have to be willing to go through those times to be able to get to the point where we figure out the answers. That's the test. That's the trial. That's the hardship. And we can't quit. We can't give up. Because the other thing that I hope that I can communicate to you is that I believe that this test is not about the outcome. In other words, Heavenly Father's not got a 90% up here that we have to meet. If we meet the 90%, we're good. We're getting into heaven. I don't believe that at all. I believe that He says to us, do your best. Do everything you can. Do as much as you can. Fight as hard as you can. You do your best. And then the Savior, through His grace, makes up all the difference of whatever we're short. And I think sometimes we forget that. He's about the process that we go through, that we learn the steps, that we learn the right things to do. Any of you that have children, I would wager that most of the women can remember about what age their kids were when they started walking. And they can say, oh, he was about this old when he started walking. So the question I would ask you is, how many of you remember how many times your child fell while they were trying to learn to walk? How many of you kept track of that? My bet is none. Not one of you kept track of how many times that child fell. Not one of you kept track of how many times he, did a face plant. Not one of you kept track of how horribly he, misstepped or whatever happened. But all of you remembered when he actually took that first step, or those first couple of steps, or walked from one of you to the other. Because the process is irrelevant. The number of times they fell, the number of times they didn't succeed is completely irrelevant. What matters is they got to where they needed to be. They started walking. And that is how I believe our Father in heaven sees us. We are, with all of our intelligence and all of our technology and everything that we do and all the money we have and CEOs and CFOs and accountants and lawyers and whatever else we are, all of that's irrelevant. We're still babies in our diapers trying to learn to take steps. And our Father in heaven does not remember how many times we fall. All He hopes for is that we don't quit, that we stand back up again and we walk to Him. And part of that, if it needs be, is the Savior holding us up, the Savior bearing us up so that we can make it to the Father. Because it's not about how many people are helping you get there, or how many people were involved in getting you there, or did you try to do it all by yourself, or none of that matters. All that matters is, did you take the steps necessary to get to your Father? So, again, what I really hope is that there can be, life is so hard, and we make so many mistakes, and we make our lives harder. We do things, and we say things, and we think things that just get in the way. And there's some people that are really angry with us, and really resentful, or never want to speak to us again. All those things are all part of it. And that's part of this life. That's part of figuring it out. That's part of getting to the other side. But my goal for me personally is I always want to be an advocate. I always want to be somebody that encourages somebody else. There's going to be plenty of people out there telling you everything you're doing wrong. There's going to be plenty of people that'll be more than happy to tell you what an idiot you are. And so if I want to be different, or if I want to be what I think the Savior wants me to be, I'm the guy that's always trying to lift somebody up. I'm the guy that wants to be an advocate. I'm the guy that wants to encourage. I want to be like my dad. I want to be somebody that can say, don't listen to them. Look at me. Focus here. Because I am telling you, there is no greater feeling than feeling like you've helped somebody else find peace, find success, and feel like they have purpose. Especially somebody who may not feel that way. And all I can say is, like I said, I've got so many mistakes, I got so many faults and so many flaws, so many things I don't do right. But the one thing I can tell you is that I will never stop trying. I will never quit. I will never not want to be the best person I can be. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to make bad choices, and I'm going to do things wrong, and I'm going to do things contrary to what somebody else may want. And I may drive my wife nuts, and I may drive my kids nuts. I don't know. All I know is I will continue doing the best that I can. I will continue to try. One other thing I want to say, and I want you to think hard about this. When I was a kid, there were a lot of people that were pretty critical of me. I went from being the most popular kid in my school to the most disliked kid in my school. And it just didn't make any sense to me. Didn't make any sense. I was the same guy. Everything was the same about me. And these people loved me, and these people didn't like me at all. Didn't want me to be even part of their school, their class. And one of the things, again, so this one was one that my mother said to me. And I really, again, I was blessed with amazing parents. Not perfect, lots of mistakes and faults and flaws, but you know what? They were perfect for me. They were amazing. But I came home one time and I just asked my mom, I'm like, I don't get it. Over here I was super popular, everybody liked me. Over here, I'm despised. Nobody likes me. Why? What's going on? And my mom made two observations. And she said, these people over here knew you. They had a chance to know you. You know, you started in school there. They knew you. They knew who you were. They got to know you. You've only been here a month. They don't know you. They don't know who you are. And she said, and they may not ever give you that chance. They may never give you the chance to get to know who you are. They may just decide, that guy, we don't want a part of us. And she's like, and there's nothing you can do about that. And she said, but the one thing I would say to you is this. If they're judging you and they don't know you, why do you give importance to what their opinion is? And that really struck me, and I realized I want to give value to people who know me, or people who are trying to work with me, or trying to help me be better. My wife, great example. My wife and I, we're similar in what our goals are. We're going in the same direction. So when my wife says something to me and tells me that I'm doing something wrong or incorrect, or maybe I ought to change this or something like that, it's not done out of criticism, and maybe she says it because she's tired of telling me. I don't know. But the thing that I can always count on with my wife are two things. One, she loves me. Loves me more than anybody else on this whole earth. And two, she wants me to be the best person I can be. So when she tells me something, she's not telling me that to be mean. She's not telling me that to hurt my feelings. She's telling me because she wants me to be better. She knows how important those things are to me. And I value her opinion because she knows me better than anyone. I value what she thinks. I value what she says because she does. She knows me better than anyone. So what I would say is, be careful about who you give power to. Be careful about who you give preference or importance to their opinion to. If there's some person on TikTok that you've never met, don't know them, never seen them, and they're giving you some kind of, they're ranting and raving about something bad about you, that person they don't know who you are. They couldn't pick you out of a crowd probably. So don't give too much weight and importance to somebody like that. Save that importance, save that value for people that know you, people that want to help you, people that are telling you things to make you better. And those are all things that you can decide for yourself. So again, I just kind of touched on some of this stuff as I go along. I think as I've kind of presented these two things. So my goal eventually is to get these to be plaques that I can make out of wood, things that I can do. I have lots of ideas. I just don't I don't know how long it's going to take or how efficient I'm going to be at doing it. But those are all some of the things that I look forward to doing. So part of the reason why I tell you this is so that I can be held accountable. If you're watching this and you're like, hey, dude, you said this 3 weeks ago you're going to do this, and it's 3 weeks later and it's not done. So that hopefully will hold me accountable a little bit, but also just to kind of maybe give you some idea of some of the things that we're going to do. So in the future, what I think I'll be doing, now that I've kind of presented this, I'll go along, and typically as the week goes through, I'll think of things, or something will come up, or something will happen. And it's something that I take some time to evaluate or think about or whatever, and if it makes enough of an impression, then I'll kind of, post at the beginning something. It may just be a truth and a counterfeit. So it may, I would do something, joy versus pleasure. And those will just be some really short things, and as you scroll through them, you'll be able to say, oh, this is a topic that I'm interested in. Oh, this is a topic I'm interested in. Or you can give me your own version of that. And then I can look at those things and kind of give my impression. And again, I would gratefully appreciate somebody giving me their opinion and giving me their feedback and giving me their impressions, because honestly, there's so much information out there and it's just so valuable. And I will tell you, I feel the difference when I don't give myself enough time of uplifting things. If I don't give myself enough time to remove myself from the world and focus on things of greater importance, if I don't do that, I feel it. I feel weaker, I feel more susceptible. So hopefully these things will help me, like I said, have a better life, do things better, and eventually my hope is that you will have better content. You'll be able to see things and see the value in this. And if this works for you, then like I said, please, subscribe and share. And then the more this builds into something, I really hope it does, the more I get feedback from people on things that they're interested in, or particular things that I can talk about. So again, appreciate your time, appreciate you listening to me. I know you could be doing 100 other things, and so thank you very much for allowing me to share this stuff with you. And like I said, like and subscribe, and hopefully we can make this edifying for all of us. Thanks. Have a good night.